Humanity has faced pandemics throughout its history, but between 1346 and 1353, something happened on a scale that was just terrifying. It was a plague that didn't just kill millions of people, it completely shattered their world and built a new one from the rubble. This is the story of the Black Death.
To really get a sense of the horror, we have to start right here, with words from someone who actually lived it. The writer Giovanni Boccaccio saw this with his own eyes in Florence. I mean, just listen to that description. This isn't some dry history lesson. It's a visceral, first-hand account of what it was like to see death coming for you, and to know there was nothing you could do.
Okay, so we've heard about the awful symptoms, but what was this disease that brought an entire continent to its knees? Let's break down the science behind this unstoppable killer.
So here's the thing. The plague wasn't just one disease, it was a triple threat. The most common form was bubonic, and that's where you get those awful swollen lymph nodes, the buboes. But then there were the other two. The pneumonic version attacked the lungs, and it was terrifying because it could spread just through the air, from person to person. And then, the septicemic form. This one was nearly 100% fatal. It got directly into your bloodstream, causing your skin to turn black. And yeah, this is almost certainly where the name Black Death comes from.
Okay, I want you to try and imagine this for a second. You're living through this nightmare, but you have no concept of bacteria, no idea what a virus is. You'd be absolutely desperate for an explanation, right? For any reason why this was happening. And that desperation led to this huge clash between fear, superstition, and the very first flickers of science.
On one side, you see the theories that were born out of pure terror. The church said it was God's punishment for sin. Scholars blamed it on planets lining up or bad air. Some people even thought earthquakes had released poisonous gases from the center of the earth. And then, on the other side, we have the simple, horrifying truth that we know today. It was a tiny bacterium called Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas that lived on ordinary black rats.
And this all comes down to a really crucial scientific idea: zoonosis. It's a bit of a fancy word, but all it means is the disease that makes the jump from an animal to a person. And you have to remember, in the Middle Ages, rats and fleas weren't just a nuisance, they were everywhere. They were in your homes, on the streets, and, most importantly, they were on the ships that connected the world.
All right, so we know the what and the how, but how on earth did this disease travel so far, so incredibly fast? Let's follow the plague's relentless march across Europe, a journey that literally moved faster than any news about it could.
Just look at this timeline. The speed is absolutely mind-boggling. It starts in Asia, hits the edge of Europe in 1346, and then it just explodes. By 47, it's in major hubs like Constantinople. A year later, it's consuming ports all over France, Spain, and Italy. In just a handful of years, it had pretty much burned its way through the entire continent. It's like a wildfire that nobody could stop.
And the story of how it first got a major foothold in Europe, well, it's pretty chilling. It might just be the first documented case of biological warfare in history. A Mongol army was attacking the city of Kaffa, but their own soldiers were dying from the plague. So what did they do? They started loading the dead, infected bodies onto their catapults and flinging them over the city walls. When the traitors inside finally escaped by ship, they had no idea they were taking the plague with them to the rest of Europe. The disease itself was an absolute nightmare, but its consequences, the aftershocks, that's what truly broke the medieval world. The sheer amount of death triggered a complete and total societal collapse.
I just want you to let this number sink in for a moment. 60%. That is the high-end estimate of Europe's entire population, wiped out. It wasn't just a number. That was more than 1 out of every 2 people. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor, a peasant or a priest. The plague didn't discriminate.
To try and put that staggering number into human terms, just think about a major city like Paris. At the peak, they were dealing with over 500 burials every single day. You can't even begin to imagine how that would overwhelm everything, how it would change the very fabric of life.
And the recovery, well, it wasn't fast. It took 2 full centuries, 200 years, for Europe's population to just get back to the level it was before the plague hit. Some cities didn't fully recover until the 1800s. The demographic scar was just that deep.
So all this death created this massive, unexpected side effect. It completely blew up the old economic system of feudalism. Here's how it happened. First, with so many people gone, there was a huge labor shortage. All of a sudden, the surviving peasants had leverage. They could demand better wages.
Then, they started leaving their old homes for better jobs in the cities. The whole system of lords and serfs just broke down. It was an economic revolution born from tragedy.
So what do you do when you genuinely believe the world is ending? Well, people pretty much went in two completely opposite directions. You had the hedonists who figured, hey, we're probably going to die tomorrow, so let's live it up today. And then you had the other extreme, groups like the flagellants, who were so convinced this was divine punishment that they would march from town to town whipping themselves in public to pay for humanity's sins.
In all this chaos and fear, people were desperate for someone to blame. And tragically, horribly, that blame fell on Jewish communities. These awful rumors started spreading that they were poisoning wells. It wasn't true, of course, but it led to brutal massacres all across Europe. It got so bad that Pope Clement VI himself had to step in and issue an official order saying they were innocent.
But here is the great paradox of the Black Death. Out of all of this unimaginable destruction, something entirely new began to rise from the ashes. A new world was about to be born.
Think about it. The pillars of medieval society, the church, the nobility, they had proven totally powerless against the plague. Their prayers and their power meant nothing, and that failure created this profound shift in thinking. People started to question the old ways, and slowly the focus of art, of science, of philosophy, it moved away from God and turned towards humanity itself.
The Black Death really was a catalyst, a massive reset button on history. The old powers were weakened, which let kings consolidate control and build the foundations of modern nations. The lives of common people who survived actually improved, and that new focus on human potential, it laid the groundwork for the explosion of creativity and discovery we call the Renaissance. In a very real way, the plague brought the Middle Ages to a crashing end and ushered in the modern world.
Now, it's really tempting to think of all this as ancient history, something safely locked away in the past. But the reality is, the plague is not gone. The bacterium, Yersinia pestis, is still out there. The huge difference, of course, is that today we have antibiotics that can treat it effectively.
And this isn't just a theoretical threat. It's endemic, meaning it's just always present in places like Madagascar, which had a major outbreak as recently as 2017. And believe it or not, a few cases are still recorded right here in the United States, mostly in the Southwest. This ancient disease is still a modern public health concern.
But despite this grim history, I think there's a really powerful and honestly hopeful message to take from this whole story. It's a message about human resilience. Pandemics have tested us again and again, and yeah, sometimes the price we've paid has been incredibly tragically high. But we have always found a way to overcome them and to rebuild. So we're left with this powerful question, aren't we? A catastrophic disease from the 14th century ended up destroying one world and, in the process, creating another. It shows us just how profoundly a pandemic can reshape everything, our society, our economy, even how we see ourselves. What lessons can we take from this 700-year-old story for the challenges that we're all facing today?